What up, saucers?
What up, players?
Woo, 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 woo. I don't know. We never know. I think we intro our episodes as being like, hey, haha, I don't know, whatever. We're just lucky you guys are here.
It's literally what happens. It's a hi, I don't know.
Oh, goodness.
Moving
But we
on.
have such a great guest today. If you are an OG saucer from like circa 2020, you'll remember our guest, Joey Palestina, ladies and gentlemen. He is a writer, musician, and actor who is making his HBO debut in a huge HBO miniseries coming out today called We Own This City. And it's an amazing show written by David Simon, and he's done The Wire. Have you heard of it? Amazing. And it's based off of a book called We Own This City about the true story about police corruption in Baltimore during mid 2000s, leading up to the Freddie Gray murder. So there's a lot that goes on in this show and a lot that goes on in this interview.
Yes, this is a really good interview just in regards to like mental health, social issues, like this, which is pretty much just catapulted by this show and what it's about, but it leads into some very good conversation with Joey. So I can't wait for you guys to hear.
Yep. So without further ado, Joey Pal. Yay! Welcome back, Joey Pal.
Welcome back.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
We're happy to have you.
It's been a long time. I feel like we had you in 2020.
Yeah, was it 2020?
Was it that long ago?
Yeah,
I think
it was.
so.
2 years.
It was when that's crazy.
Time flies.
I know.
Time
it feels like
flies.
10 years ago and also yesterday.
Yeah.
Well, that 2020, everybody, we're all in agreement that it just sort of like, it feels like you just said, it was 15 years ago, but it's also like I have no real recollection of anything that happened in that year, except a couple of projects that I started. But besides that, it's a wash.
Yeah, blacked out.
Yeah.
Done.
I think
See you later.
I think this
Hasta la pasta.
podcast, hasta la pasta. I feel like the podcast has been my way of like knowing time. Like I feel like if we didn't have this podcast, like because week by week we can be like, oh, because that was around the time we had this guest and like we talked about this around this time. That I feel like is the only saving grace when it comes to my frame of time or whatever.
Part of the positive of being creative, right, is that like you just have these pit stops along the way so that you could make sure that you remember, especially in a time of trauma and crisis where everything is a blur now. You're like, oh, I started this project or I did this podcast or I remember this. So it's nice to have those checkpoints so that you could remember, because if not, it would be done. Like Mom said, blacked out.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it was like monotonous fucking service and just then that like without any creative project. Yeah, you're right.
I really think about that a lot too. Like besides starting projects like you two, like you had the podcast back then, I was working on an album back then, but like sometimes I'll go about my day and I'll be like, oh, it's April 4th, but I wonder what I was doing April 4th in 2020. Like I wonder besides like walking around in my boxers in my apartment and like taking a bath or FaceTiming you at like 1 a.m, like I wonder where my headspace was. I wonder
you were doing Instagram lives.
I was, and now that makes me sick.
No, that was so fun. When Joey used to do Instagram lives at the start of the pandemic, and they were fucking hilarious because it would just be me, Nick, Sin,
and like seven other
and
people,
Phil, maybe,
yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it was a pretty crazy experience. I look back at that and I'm like, God, that was so dumb to do that. But we were all in a mode of just adapting to whatever was coming our way.
We were just trying to connect. That's like the main thing is just connection. And like I feel like our friendship, Joe, got closer because of the pandemic, because we were like, I don't know, we were just like, we got to talk to each other.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how that happened. Like we were always like friends on the peripheral, me, you, and Ryan. We were like, hey, we love each other, but like we're not going to check in every week. And then like we're not in that friend section. But then suddenly, like because of the pandemic, we just kind of got I think selfishly started
the reading.
Well, the reading, and also selfishly it started. I probably never told you this, but I was like during the pandemic, I'm like, oh, you know what? I think I want to move to Los Angeles. when this is all done.
And
so
then here you are.
let me reach out to Alyssa and Ryan just to pick their brain on LA and see what that's like. And then we just kind of.
Yeah, you're one of my like billions of friends that are like, I'm definitely moving out to LA and then never will. And I'm like pissed about it.
20 years and running.
Yeah, great. Well, let's start a little bit from the beginning before we get into this really fun project that comes out today, April 25th. How long have you been acting? I know you went to the same school as I did at a different time, but I don't know if you were started before then or wanted to start professionally after.
Well, I feel like I was always acting like when I was a little kid, you know, like I started to watch movies at a really young age, like The Godfather and like heavy movies and then like, Star Wars and stuff like that. And immediately I was like, oh my God, this is something that I love. And I would just start like impersonating my family members, my dad, who's in the other room. My dad's in the other room right now. And he actually doesn't even know that I have like an ongoing, like 10, 20 videos when I was really young of impersonating him. And I feel like that's when it started. Like I would just do these mockumentaries when I was really little of like everybody in my family. Yeah. And then once I got to like 12 or 13 or 14, I did a scene in the Glass Menagerie in middle school. And I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. And then, well, you asked professionally, when did I start?
I mean, no. I mean, whatever that means to you, because when I'm asked that, I'm just like, well, I was in some shit when I was a kid.
Yeah. I think it's important to start at the beginning. Like that's how the road started for me, was that like music and movies and writing kind of all happened at the same time. And I would just pull from different passions depending on the day. And, I was obsessed with Robert De Niro. I was like part of his fan club and I would write to him. And of course I thought that he was writing me back, but it was probably somebody like an assistant.
It was your dad.
Yeah, and I had it was probably my dad. And I had like a million pictures of him up and all the VHS tapes.
Oh, that's
and like,
cute.
Yeah, like it was just, I feel like it was something that I connected to how personal he was. And he was like one of the first actors that I remember watching where I felt like he wasn't really acting. And I was like, oh my God, I love this. And then, I applied to Montclair State and got into the acting department and, thought I was a hot shot when I was younger. I got some good parts at Montclair State. And then like everything just went once you graduate as an acting major, they should always give you a course as an actor of like how to deal with not acting through the decade of your 20s and mentally what that's going to do to you. And so I kind of stepped away from it in my mid 20s to my late 20s to pursue music and education and counseling and teaching. And then I got back into it the last couple of years.
So what is the show that's coming out that you are a regular in, will you give a rundown for our audience of what We Own This City is about? The premise of the show?
It's about police corruption in Baltimore between 2005 and I believe 2014. This specific rogue gun trace task force unit that was sort of allowed to do whatever they want.
Sounds like the LAPD.
Yeah, I mean, they just actually released a behind the scenes today interviewing all the writers, and it's pretty amazing. And it's just about their journey, and particularly this one character, Wayne Jenkins, who is the head of this task force, and how once they all started down this path of corruption, taking money here, taking money there, pulling people over, planting money, like all types of crazy stuff.
Yeah.
How they just kind of got past the point of no return. And that's pretty much what it's about.
And what are the years that it covers?
I think it's from 2005 until 2013 or 14. Yeah.
So does it cover the Freddie Gray murder?
It happens, I believe, right after that. So it's
this is the
tension.
Lead up.
Yes, the tension. It might happen during the show or right after the show, and then that obviously raises the stakes and the tension within the city. And there are scenes pertaining to that as well, I believe. Maybe not directly, but in the book, which was written by Justin Fenton, you could sense the tension in the city because of that, and how important it was for police always, but especially in this moment, to be held accountable for their actions and to have this particular unit just go AWOL
Yeah.
It's going to be a really powerful, beautiful piece. And I don't know if I'm a regular. I just want to clarify something.
Oh.
My dad posted all this stuff like, hey, my son Joey, I'm proud. He's in it, which is beautiful. But
you're in multiple episodes.
well, I guess you
could be cut. Yeah, you could be cut, but I'm sure.
Yes,
I'm sure we'll see your mug.
Yes, I've been kind of reluctant, except to post the trailer, to post anything because I shot for episodes 2, 3, 4, and a non-speaking scene in 6. But as both of you ladies know, you don't know, what you're actually going to be in. And so I've been with friends that have been like Instagram haywire, like I'm in this and I'm in that, and then we watch it together, and I'm like, you're not really in. You're not really.
I didn't know that because I'm not in acting at all, so I didn't know that.
Yeah. So like I've always tried to. Commercials are different, but for episodic television or film, you don't really know until the day when you watch the episode.
Oh.
So I've been kind of trying to just keep it kind of like under wraps.
Yeah. Well, here
too
you go.
late. You're on a podcast.
Too late.
Yeah.
We're talking about it here.
Well, I could say that I shot episodes 2, 3, 4, and 6. So
yes, and this project is so cool too because of the book that it's based off of, and the fact that it's a David Simon show. And for those who don't know, David Simon he's done The Wire.
He started. I don't know if he started, but I know his big first thing was being involved in Homicide. Then he went to The Corner, then The Wire, then Treme, then The Deuce. He did The Deuce. He did a couple other ones, Generation Kill. He's, for me, like, to have my first, let me just recap something really quickly.
Yeah.
When I decided to start auditioning again, like during COVID, right around the time we had the podcast, like that time, I cold emailed just a random agent. Like, I was like, blah, 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 my name's Joey. Here's my shitty headshot. How are you? And so she emailed me back, and she's based usually like more in Baltimore, D.C., and Philly. And she's like, yeah, I don't really have anybody that looks like you, so why don't you come aboard? And I was like, really? And she's like, yeah.
Okay.
And so the second audition she sent me on was this show that was untitled at the time, and I kept getting called in, and I was like, this is fun, I guess, but I don't really know what's going on. And then so the last callback, they were like, yeah, George Pelicanos and David Simon will be in the room, and
but you didn't know those names.
David.
So that's when you found out.
Yeah, well, I was like, David Simon. I was like, not the David Simon that's my favorite writer, as a writer. For somebody to write television that is about the human condition and experience, he is one of the greatest writers, and is notorious for the most diverse casts since Homicide and The Corner. And so when I auditioned for it in the last callback, I was like, okay, I had fun, but I had no idea. And then a month and a half went by, and I was driving up to the Catskills. Alyssa knows the story.
Yeah.
And my agent called me and says, yeah, you booked this.
I told you would.
And
that was your second audition. Oh, wow.
And I had to pull over, and I almost had a panic attack. And I know it sounds kind of funny, but there was like, Alyssa kind of walked me through this whole part of this experience for me. I think because you get so used to going on so many auditions, or as an artist, you're both artists, you're going to release your music no matter what. You're going to write no matter what. You're going to act no matter what, even if it's your own stuff. And then occasionally, every once in a while, there's like a third party that is bigger that comes down and perhaps recognizes your craft. And I wasn't ready. I wasn't used to it. I was just like, all right. And I kind of lost my marbles for about a month and a half. Like, I didn't
really?
Yeah, I got into a really dark place. And like, I would call people like Alyssa or my friends, other friends that are working as actors. And I would say, well, what happens if I, drop my lines on set, or what happens if this, or what happened? Like, all this stuff happened. And then I got to set, and I was like, this is like I was when I was 10, like making videos with my brother. It's the same thing. I'm prepared and I'm having fun. And so I wanted to share that because I feel like, I think that it's important to have that balance mentally. And like, a lot of the stuff that you guys talk about on your podcast is about mental health and awareness, and how important that is. And I struggled with that for the first couple months when I got this job. And then when I got, when I got there, I was like, I could do this every day.
Yeah, it's so ironic because it's like, people fight their whole careers for certain milestones. And then when you're like, you are granted it based on your own merit, your own talent, your own dedication and work ethic and everything, it's like all of a sudden imposter syndrome kicks in or something. And it's just like, oh, but do they know that I'm a fraud? Like they think that I can actually, and then like all that doubt. Well, like you said, once you got into the room, it's like being a kid again, because kids they don't doubt themselves. They're not like, they're too naive, but it's also the gift of being a child that they're too naive to be like, oh, maybe these other people around me are more accomplished, or I'm sure they've done this before, or they know the rules and I have never.
Yeah,
they don't care.
Don't question
it's just like,
the validity of their imagination. I think that's a big thing too.
I think both of those points are right on the head. What you said about imposter syndrome is just like, I think I needed to go through that. You know what I mean? Because when after the last callback, I remember being in my bed every night, and this is still COVID, and I had COVID right after your podcast, actually, the first time.
Oh.
And it was, and I was coming out of COVID during this audition, and it was really tough for me. Like, I know a lot of people being like, oh, I had COVID, and now everyone's so numb to it. You're like, oh yeah, who hasn't? But actually, it's not like the flu. And it really affected me like long haul symptoms. And so getting that, I remember being in my bed after this callback, and I was like, I'm going to get this part. Like, I just feel like there's something that I feel like I'm going to get this part. And then a month went by and I didn't hear anything. And then I heard something, and then I had to pull over on the middle of the road and like go to a rest area, and like, because I had a panic attack. And
were you like excited in that moment? Were you like excited panic, or you were like terrified panic?
I was terrified. Paulie, one of my best friends, was driving, and Lissa knows him. And I remember, like, I got the call. I was like this. I was like, hey, Pat. And she goes, yeah, you booked this. And I like couldn't breathe, and he had to pull over. And then, I went through my phone, including Alyssa, and called my cousin and other people that have been working in the business, and they all had the same advice. And that goes back to something else that's important that I know we've talked about on this podcast is community, and how important your community is, not only when you're riding high and you're booking stuff, because that's going to come and go, especially as an actor, but when you're feeling low, to be able to channel and use your resources, my family, my friends, people that are within the business, that are in some of the highest up positions as working actors and writers in writers' rooms, that can still be human and say, slow down and breathe. This is your part. Just breathe and relax and enjoy it. They don't get it wrong. You're not going to get it wrong. Just breathe and take it day by day. But I feel like I just needed to go through that neurotic stage to get out of it, to feel my senses again. But it's like you said before, you're so used to being in a certain position for so long. I'm going to write. I'm going to do whatever I want to do. And then when something bigger comes, you're like, whoa.
Yeah. Do you feel like you would have had the same reaction if you didn't love David Simon and love this project and it being on HBO so much? Do you think you still would have had this imposter syndrome panic attack?
Probably not as much because, I think that it's like if it was David Chase from The Sopranos or something like that, like being a little kid, being a young man watching The Wire and saying, there's nothing like this on that exposes education in the inner city, police, family dynamic, relationships, actors that are human. You're watching it and you feel like you're in the room with them. It's not very glossy. It's not bingy. You could just take it in. I remember watching that and being like, this is how I want to write. Yeah. And I want to be in these types of things where it's human. It's human. It just feels human. Yeah. And so I think that because the stakes were high and it was Alexa Fogel casting and Pat Moran, who are two great casting directors. Yeah, I think everything just had a whirlwind. And then I just calmed down and I believed in myself. All those corny internet memes that we see, it's real. It's real. It's really what it is. It really is believing in yourself and being kind to yourself and giving yourself love and knowing makes me emotional to say this, but it's like I wasn't 7 years old talking to myself in a mirror, acting all these different movies for no reason. Like, this is why I'm here. And another reason why I was here is to be a guidance counselor in Patterson for 7 years, and to be a special ed teacher, and to be a musician, and to be a son. Like, it's everything. It's all connected. And I embraced that eventually, but it took me a little bit.
Did you, because it's so fascinating, your time working in counseling in the inner city. So I wonder how much that informs you as an actor, especially approaching a project like this.
I think that between being a school counselor in Patterson and having a master's in counseling, it has helped me to audition. It's helped me as an actor in my 40s to understand parts and to understand pain and to connect in a way to the characters that I wasn't able to in my 20s, which really, I can't speak for either of you, were a nightmare for me. My 20s were like an ego-stricken vanity. Like, my band was touring a lot. I was doing a lot, but all types of vices that we've talked about in the previous podcast, all types of things coming in and out of my life. I wasn't able to accept rejection. I had poor coping skills. And I think that getting a master's in mental health counseling and working in education for 11 years has got me to a point as an actor where I'm okay. I feel good. Like, I don't take things personal. I keep it moving, and I'm going to find the nuances in the character with the help of wonderful people like Alyssa during my self-tapes, to be perfectly honest, community. And that I think has helped me. But for this particular story that is about police corruption and about the inner city and about the day-to-day of all the different characters, the cops that go home to their wives, the cops that are African-American, that are white, that are Latinx, everybody together reminded me a lot of working in Patterson, where we had to use the police for certain issues. We had to use the school counselors. We had to use the administration. We had to use counsel. It's all connected. And David Simon and George Pelicanos do that better than anybody.
And you played a dirty cop. Just want to make sure you play a dirty cop on this.
You don't really know if I'm a dirty cop. You know, it's
spoiler.
It's alluded to, but I'll leave it up to you to decide.
Yeah.
Okay.
That you kind of led into this question. I wanted to know there's obvious answers, but like your opinion on why shows like this are so important to make, especially in this climate today, just socially, you know, like you being able to be a part of something that's really commentating on current issue. I mean, they've been issues, but you know, very topical right now. So I guess.
And the fact that it was my first job, like being passionate about this type of thing, being knowledgeable, being informed because I read and I understand facts and science and data and all the things, and understanding too that I have family that are law enforcement, and understanding too that I also know people that are in law enforcement that are also iffy and tricky, and understanding, for me at least, I can't speak for anybody else, that thinking in absolutes about anything might be tricky as well, and that there are layers to things. The fact that this is the first show where it's able to expose something that I think one side has gotten right about awareness of actual police brutality and how this happens, and a side that I think has sort of pushed it to the side and neglected to talk about this. This is a true story where something happened for 8 years under the radar, and
not even that long ago.
No, it's not even that long ago. And I think also it plays into something that is very important that we're seeing globally outside of police, which is people, usually men, in power. And what happens when you have too much power, where your behavior goes unchecked. Beginning, middle, the end. That is the log line of this show. And unfortunately, the log line of a lot of things that we've been dealing with in this country and globally, when you go unchecked, when your power goes unchecked, and then you wind up in this whirlwind and this tunnel of I'm just going to keep going. And in some ways, everybody can, at least I could speak that I've had behavior like this, that I've been able, like, you just keep going with something that you know might be wrong, whether it's a faulty relationship. That's a bad analogy, but what I'm saying is, this is such an important story to tell. And the fact that it's my first professional acting gig, the awareness that it's going to bring, I'm excited, because for the people that this is a sensitive subject. It's a sensitive subject for a lot of people. A lot of people take things very personal. A lot of the people on set, I mean, we had police officers on set with us, working with us, how to handle a gun, how to do this, how to carry something. We had, I had a conversation with a police officer that has been on the force for 15 years, who I still talk to. We text, and he's a beautiful dude, and he was the point of contact on set every day for everybody. And he was also part of this task force. And so,
wow, it's but not in the dirty.
No, no. And it's so it's just a very interesting layered show, layers. And that's important that we pull the layers of how this happened. How did we get here?
And like, it's interesting because it kind of acts as a model of, that was one situation of, structural power going unchecked. But like you said, that pattern is pervasive throughout our country, especially. But, a lot of just power structure in general, a lot of the systems are set up for that. It's set up so that the people on top, they don't have to worry about getting checked ever. And whether it's politics or like, police departments, or, it's just a lot of the power in this country it's designed that way. Like, once you're up there, you're protected by like multiple layers of fall men and women below you, and just like and people paying things off, and people taking care of things. And it's just like, it's just how we structure some of the biggest structures in our country. And so to kind of like have a story told like that and break it down into just one, it's one group's story, but it really is representative of so many things.
And this interesting sort of approach that I think is also tragic and human, that I think happens in this story that you'll see, is validating behavior, because there are things that you do that are good in your job as well. So this winds up being, and this transcends through multiple platforms of things, right? Where it's like, well, I did this and I confiscated this, or I saved this person's life this one day. And so it's okay that I do this. Yeah. And so back to what David Simon and George Pelecanos do so well, of exposing these types of nuanced contradictions. It's just, it's sort of a breath of fresh air that it's not fiction. This is a true story. And I mean, of course, dialogue, things are going to be contrived. It's a show, it's writing. But this book, I read it while I was shooting, and it's powerful. And you read it and you're like, fuck, like, this happened, and we know this happened. And like you said, this continues to happen. And so, I suggest you watch the behind the scenes. There's a great interview with they just released it today.
Do you, you said that you have family member, you have friends that are in law enforcement. You have, that buddy that was working on the show as well. Because of your position, I'll just say, as a police officer, that was your role. Did you have to approach this in a certain way where you had to, I don't know, was it uncomfortable trying to find the empathy in your role? And afterward, did anything change with how you viewed law enforcement? Because this project dives so heavily into the corruption and the lies, and then eventually a really devastating murder. Did that make you second guess departments in other cities, and what's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, and tricky conversation, and this could be something that maybe we disagree on, and that's fine too. But I think what it did for me is is go back to what I was talking about thinking in absolutes. Like for the character that I had to work on, I had to have empathy. He's a person who has a family, who goes home, who has coffee, who goes to work, who watches TV and thinks certain things are funny and certain things aren't, and is perhaps sneaky and tricky and all these things. But I know that I have to connect with all of that.
Yeah.
If I'm going to make him believable, I'm not just going to go in and be this jerk off that's like, you know, hey, you know, it's like he's a dude. He's
multidimensional. Yeah.
He's multidimensional. And I think that is something else I learned, but that I've always goes back to my training as a counselor, getting a master's in counseling, where we are trained to understand multi-dimensions of people and work with them, and not think in absolutes about everything as a whole, but try to find the empathy working in counseling with some of the most unlikable people, right? With all different types of criminal records. You know, whether I mean, I worked in education, but, you know, I've worked also, you know, as an intern with adults, and you have to find the empathy in the lowest of the low, which I think is controversial sometimes, and people don't agree with that. But I think in order, as an artist and a counselor, to stay human is to try to find that condition. And you know, I don't know.
I agree. Because
I rambled a little bit.
That made perfect sense. And it's interesting because art is like the greatest form of expression that humanity had. That's how we relate to our world and our times. And so the incredible thing about art is that you can watch a movie where the protagonist is a serial killer, and it follows his point of view throughout the whole thing. And you see him wake up in the morning, you see him make his breakfast, all the things you're describing, like coffee, he has a family, and you see these human aspects of him that you relate to, you have empathy for. And then, you know, throughout, you watch him like murder people in this movie, whatever, and you're like, this is clearly a bad person. He's doing these evil things. And yet there are moments where you feel bad for him, or you feel sorry for him, or even in a pathetic kind of way, but you feel emotions for them on some level of like relating as a human. But that's what art does. So as an actor, of course you have to do that, because then there's the people viewing. The point is for us to see the humanity in all these people. Whether or not they're good people is not even really to say. It's just like reading, you know, Lolita, the book Lolita.
Yes.
So it's like, yeah, you're reading it and you're just like, oh, it's so sad. Like, kind of see why he would think this, but like, he's a pedophile, and we're reading from his perspective. And so it's
and how brilliant of a writer that guy is, that you're reading this and you're like, oh, and then you have to check yourself every once in a while, because of why? Because the way he describes the landscape while they're traveling through the country and all these things, and you're like, wow, this is beautiful. And so that was always a theme, you know, like the director Ronaldo Marcus Green, who directed King Richard. He directed these 6 episodes.
I just watched that. So good.
Yeah, he directed that, and his father worked in the New York Correction Department. I can't speak for him, but I know that he's talked about it on the behind the scenes. And so one thing that David Simon does so well goes back to community, is how important the community is in his shows. Hiring a lot of local actors from Baltimore, local companies that are involved. There was, you know, like pet drives, all types of things we did within the city. And that was a theme too. I think, I can't speak for the director, but a lot of people had a lot of family in connection with law enforcement and the state correction facility. And so to be able to write a story, I think, and be in a story and act in a story where you have to keep it human and not be so judgmental, yet when you watch it, you know, that's when you could have fun with that. You know what I mean? And say like, oh man, this guy's an asshole. But I liked my character too, because you'll see that he's kind of on the fence.
I kind of, because I have never been, at least in my educational career as an actor. Yes, I've played a lot of different people, villains included, whatever that means, villains, right? But nothing recently that made me pause as far as finding the empathy, right? And that's why I find it so interesting to hear your experience finding the empathy in these specific police officers, right? Especially in a time, and look, I don't want to. I keep saying I don't want to speak for. I don't know why, but I would assume not only because the book was so popular that this show came into fruition because in 2020, that's after George Floyd, Black Lives Matter just became such a monumental movement, more so than ever. And a story like this is going to want to be told, going to want to be consumed. And so I feel like after all of that, like trauma, really coming into it and playing someone like a police officer where we know what police officers are and what they're capable of, I feel like that does, at the end of the day, can take a lot out of someone. I feel like for me, maybe it's because I don't have the experience in counseling like you do, an experience where I have to really find that empathy, really find that humanity. I feel like I would be like, how the fuck am I going to approach this?
Yes.
You know?
And I think that the other thing too is like,
without judgment.
Well, without judgment, and when I worked in Patterson, there were moments with police officers and children and me, without disclosing anything, that these kids were happy to see this police officer and me in the same room to get them out of their house or to get them into another place to live. And so we worked hand in hand a lot with the juvenile department of the police officers and, other teachers and other educators. And I think when it works, it can work. When it doesn't work, it does not work. But I tried to use some of that and tried to think about those police officers that I knew in Patterson that I worked with for years, that I would call and say, have you seen so-and-so on the streets? We're trying to get him back into school. No, but let me go around the block again and I'll let you know. I'll call you back. There are people that work in the community that help. And for me, that was important to think about, even though I had to do the opposite here, right? But I'll never forget those people. I'll never forget those people. You know what I mean? Because they're people, you know what I mean? And they have families too. And it's not everyone, right? But I think for me too, and I do this, like you quickly go to the guy that I knew in high school that pushed you into the locker, that was an all-star football player who always was kind of aggressive and got drunk. And we craft that as the police officer because frankly, that is a personality.
Yes.
Period. Period. And so, but I've always tried to stay in a place of, well, is that every personality?
Right. And of course it's not. Like we can't, as artists, but especially actors, like the whole point is to like show the shades of humanity, meaning you already acknowledge that there's not just a handful of personality types. That's not possible.
Absolutely. And so we'll see what happens. I think since then it's been funny because I've just been kind of getting called in mostly for procedural shows like lawyers and cops and serial killers.
Yes.
Alyssa's my go-to serial killer reader. She's quite the director, Alyssa. I will say that.
I believe that.
Really
I'm
amazing.
Just bossy. I'm just bossy.
You are. Do you see how sometimes I get frustrated?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You're like, fuck you.
This is Joey frustrated. If you're on YouTube, you can watch. He's just like this. I'm in the back, like fucking with the camera, and you're me on the Zoom, like shouting out some annoying direction. You're like, let's do it again.
I take it. I have to take it in, but it gets to a point that sometimes where I'm like, we'll do a take, and I'll be like, I hope, Alyssa, is this the one? And you're like, yeah, this one was good. All right, let's do it again. It's fucking 1 a.m.
It's so funny.
But it helps. It's back to community, right? It's like having people that I'm grateful that I have people like her and my friend Marley and my other friend Jack who are going to be transparent with me and say, nah, let's push it a little bit more. And because of that, you get called. I've been, get called in for the same casting directors. I wouldn't have been able to do that without my people because I would be impatient and be like, oh, sure. Yeah, this was fine.
And you're a writer too. What was that like, because I know you were inspired, obviously, as an actor to play a David Simon character, but as a writer, working with his dialogue and working with him, how did that inspire you as a writer?
Well, you know, like when I was when I was reading for it, I was like, this really is good and easy to, like, it just pops off my mouth. It was just like, it's like me and the guys just like over a beer talking, but I'm like, wow. And like, I would be working out or I'd be doing yoga and like practicing the lines. And I'm like, this just feels so natural to say it. And so when I found out it was him, you know, I was like, and then I just learned, like, I remember going to set and knowing everybody's lines because I'm just like, in my scenes,
like, flowed conversationally,
as a writer before an actor, like I feel like I'm a writer and a musician, then an actor. I feel like as a writer, I was like, I know your line, I know your line. You didn't say the right line. You did say the right line, and like because I know what it's like to be a writer, and then you know you get on a stage and somebody doesn't say your line the right way or whatever. And so I approached it not just from like a counseling perspective, but also as a writer who acts, because I wanted to do honor to the script. I mean, it's one of the best television writers of all time. And so,
but they didn't care. Did they care about improvising? How many people actually improvised on set?
They improvised. We had some fun takes where we would kind of throw back and forth and do some stuff after I feel like we got some solid groundwork done, and there was a creative collaboration. I mean, like I said, I'm in like 5 or 6 scenes, but when I wasn't, you know, I would just be kind of there, like, you know, listening to everybody and watching. I was like a bird, because I also have to say that my experience as a production assistant on Boardwalk Empire and The Following and The Americans in my mid-30s really helped this too. So when I got to set, I felt comfortable. I knew what transpo was. I knew what set dressing was. I knew all these different departments that Alyssa's very familiar with too. So that all helped me feel very comfortable. But as a writer, I was like in my dream. You know what I mean? Like, I still have the scripts. Like,
I love that.
Well, speaking of writing, talk to us about Mental Floss.
Yeah, it's just another little fun thing I did during the pandemic that, you know, with my buddy Nick Setadakata, who's a brilliant writer, musician, animator in New Zealand. He lives in New Zealand, and we just wanted to start to work together on stupid, fun skits, like a little playpen for us to write, like a little comedic gym, you know, and not thinking about it so much in how are we going to get here? See, I do this sometimes as a musician too. How am I going to get here? Well, how am I going to get to 500 likes? How am I going to get to 500 Spotify plays? How am I going to get here? I feel like once I shifted and I was like, you know what? We're going to do this for fun.
Yeah.
And wherever it goes, we're just going to continue to write these goofy, stupid, animated, you know, skits for the next 40 years. We've agreed to do it for 40 years, and we'll see where it goes, you know? And if we get into a writer's room at some point, that'll be fun. But I think the point is using our people, using Alyssa, using other people, having fun, laughing, and getting weird. And so that's what it is, you know? It's just like a weird little animated series about nothing. It's about nothing. It's just completely.
I love that.
I don't know if you've seen it, Molly.
Random.
I think I posted some on my Instagram. But I don't know if you saw one where it was like, it was me and Joey. I've been in a couple now, which is great.
Yes.
Billy and Rhonda. And it goes back to like our friend Steve. Yeah, sorry.
It's the one where you're like trying to decide what to eat.
Yes.
That cracked me up. That was so funny.
That's been one of the more popular ones, and I think it's been fun for me. I love, as a writer and a musician, to be able to use my people and to have them use me and I use them, and like, and because it's like a positive sort of virus. It just spreads to everybody, and then they share it, and then it's like, I feel lucky and blessed. I mean, I'm not very religious, but I feel blessed to know so many people that are so talented. That are just so talented, that are like, yeah, sure, I'll do this, you know, and oh, sure, I'll do this, yeah, sure thing, and I feel very grateful for that, and so that's what that is. It's a fun exercise, play gym.
I liked it because it was so. So for people listening, you should definitely check it out. We'll repost that one then. I think Melissa that you were in, because it was like, you're right, it's about nothing, and yet at the same time, it's like it's everything that happens every day, but it's then basic at the same time, nothing. It's like a couple sitting there like, what do you want to eat? I don't know. What do you want to eat? Well, let's have this. I don't care what we eat. No, we had this yesterday, but it's like so hilarious to me. And it's just like,
well, fun fact, we improvised that nothing, we just made it up.
We
So
vibed
funny.
off that because I think it's like what you just said. It's like those little pockets of conversations that we have with our lover or our friend or
that
our
no
parents,
one else is there for.
that nobody else is there for, and you start to reach a level of irritability. And for me, at least when I'm in relationships, that level of irritability can skyrocket very quickly. And so I've always loved to write about things that irritate me rather quickly, or things that frustrate. And like what we talked about in the previous podcast is sort of like relationships. And so I love writing about relationships because frankly, sometimes they irritate me. And so there's so much there to write about, like these little things, like eating, like deciding what you want to eat.
Funny, because like Alyssa, your character, it was like it's like, well, both were frustrating, but like yours was like that nightmare girlfriend where you're just like, what? Well, what the hell? Like, what do you want? I don't remember all the details. I just remember watching that and be like, oh my God, that like being in a relationship where it's like that obnoxious.
Just very
for the other person to act
indecisive.
like,
Yeah.
what? Yeah,
Just very
indecisive, but also like saying you don't care, but then like so particular that nothing works. It is so funny. It was so funny.
And then with the guy that's like just fucking exists, he's just around. He's just like, fuck it. I don't, whatever you want. Yeah.
And then you're just like, why are people even in relation? I mean, that could be a moment. That doesn't mean that's what somebody's whole relationship is like.
That'll be our part 3 interview. We'll go back to that for part 3.
Yeah,
but
for real.
I was going to say, Molly, me and Joey were talked about like, because Billy and Rhonda are so fun for us. It was just so fun. Like we just did it so easily because me and Joey have known each other for fucking years. So it's just really easy for us to vibe and improvise. But we're thinking about like, what if Billy and Rhonda had a podcast? And there'd be like short little blips of just like a relationship, like just going under. Like, how did you explain it, Joey? Like 2 people who shouldn't have a podcast have a podcast or something?
I forgot, but that sounds about right.
2 people who start a podcast to save their relationship, and the podcast ends up like destroying their relationship or something like that.
Yeah, and it's endless. It's endless because there's endless room for arguments in relationships and compromise.
And like especially when the arguments are over nothing. Nothing is like the baseline. So people who can argue over nothing can just constantly argue because there's like nothing going on.
That's what made Seinfeld so brilliant for people that like Seinfeld, is that their whole thing was about nothing, but also about the fun thing also about Mental Floss is that as a writer, me and Nick, it's because it's animated, we could be like, let's make this guy a piece of celery.
Right.
Yeah.
Or let's make this guy a bear or a peacock or whatever. Like Alyssa just did something for us, and she plays an aardvark. You know, and so
Molly will love that one when it comes out. You guys need to drop that one soon.
Yeah, I think we're going to do it next week. But I think that's the fun thing that I never really experienced in the animated world that I don't know much about. That Nick has been helping me with is just being like, we could bend when the rules are just so bendable. You could do anything.
It's like it just gave me very much Adult Swim vibes.
That's exactly what it is.
It needs to be on Adult Swim. Like
that's
the kind of thing that comes on and then you're like half asleep and something comes on and you're like, A, that's the funniest thing I've ever seen, and B, what the fuck was that? Like,
you know what, Molly? That's a great like log line, like half asleep comedy. That's really what it is. It's like that stuff when you're like a little faded and you're kind of like this, and you're also like looking at your phone while you're looking at something else, and you're watching it, and then you go back to it. Eventually, that would describe all of our fans.
Exactly, and then you realize like it's actually the single most funny thing you've ever seen, and you can't explain to anyone why. Like they have to watch it because you're just like, this was nothing.
There's
like, what just happened?
And the other thing that I know that you two know doing this and other things that you've done is that it's taken me and Nick, like me and Nick are writing things. And sometimes, you know, I'll send him something, he'll have me revise it. I'll do the same. And there's been some days where we've disagreed. Mostly we always agree because we're both goofballs, but it goes back to that, putting yourself in a position where you have to creatively collaborate. We have to collaborate with each other in life. We have to coexist. And like, as corny as that sounds. And so on an artistic front, it really is important that we meet in the middle. There's some things that I've written that Nick will say like, all right, well, let's relook at this. I'm not sure about this. And I would do the same. And now we've managed to be in this ebb and flow where we feel each other and we realize we're getting to know each other more. You know, it's like, it's all like what you two do. It's always playing hot potato. You're just throwing it back and forth as an actor or a musician or two podcast hosts. And it's all about the ebb and flow. And some days we're going to be a little grumpier. Some days we're going to disagree, and some days we're going to agree. But but if we're smart and open, we're going to get stronger. Our relationship is going to get stronger, and that's what's happening with this project. And I'm grateful for that.
Yeah,
I love that.
Speaking of collaboration, when did you start? When did you start?
Yes. I just have to do that for Alyssa to laugh. That's it.
Thanks, Joe. When did you start Ultraviolet, your band?
Oh, that's my band.
I was like, tell people what it is.
I started a music project, during the pandemic, and it was me and my best friend. We were in a previous band called Thing One for years. We toured through our 20s, played with Modest Yahoo and Ra Ra Riot and the Gin Blossoms, all these fun bands. And so
Ryan opened for you guys once.
Ryan played with us a couple times, and so during the pandemic, we hadn't written music in a while, and we just promised each other that we were going to work on a couple of tracks, and then a couple of tracks turned into 12, turned into 13, and it's sort of kind of what we talked about in the first podcast. It's sort of like I started to document sort of like a moody fictional journal entries of somebody that falls in lust for somebody else on the internet, right? And so all of these songs in this first album revolve around that in this sort of digital electronic kind of atmosphere, sort of like, Depeche Mode meets Tame Impala type of sound. And so it just kind of took off, and now we're just releasing music, but we're doing it slowly because there's too many other things going on, and our heads will explode. And so I'm learning just to kind of pace myself with it. We're playing the Mercury Lounge in New York City, May 15th.
Nice.
And we're releasing our third single, April 21st. And it's just
4 days
nice
ago,
and slow.
So guys, check it out.
Oh, it's 4 days ago. Yeah. So, and it's nice and slow, but I'm very proud of the music. I feel like the music is good. We spent the money to get the right people. There's 20 musicians involved, including Ryan.
Wow.
Across the planet, from Japan to New Zealand to LA to New York and so I'm very proud of it. It's going to be a really cool, kind of sexy project. The music is good, but I'm not going to get like crazy obsessive like I can get over it. I can get like really manic about projects and like go back and continue to look at like Instagram and YouTube views and do this whole thing. And I think once you surrender to that and just kind of curate your own career, you're a singer, right? And so it's like curating your own career slowly, you're going to get to where you need to go. And in the meantime, you're going to build, you're going to have a gig, you're going to do an acoustic show, you're going to film a song singing, you're going to do something else, you're going to get another follower, you're going to get another follower. But I think we're so brainwashed by like, it's either nothing or 15,000 views.
Yeah.
And
I know.
but what I'm excited about are the 83 people that are going to come to that Mercury Lounge show. Most of them are the people that I know, because that's where the craft starts. That's where the community starts. That's where your podcast started. That's where I started as an actor and a musician. You start with the people that are most familiar, but yet we're obsessed with who are the people that we don't know that are going to connect to our stuff. And eventually it'll get there.
I know. That's like, Alyssa, remember we were getting, it's like been a thing until we got one, like a review from someone that we didn't know, like when we started the podcast, because we're like reading these reviews and it's like friends and family, like of course we're grateful. It's like supportive people, but we were like I'd see it and I'd be like, do you know this person? And she's like, oh yeah, that's like my aunt. She's like, do you know this person? Oh yeah, I went to college with them. We're like, well, and then there was the one time that we were like, do you know this person? No, do you? And we're like, oh my God, what happened? Like someone that we don't know. But you're right. It has to start. It has to start with your community, and that's your foundation.
And remember what we were talking about in the first podcast, right? That need to connect. And it's something that we all suffer from. And if we're artists, and we're artists in New York and Los Angeles, it's very tempting to go down this hole that we all do, which is, I wonder if anybody cares about this. I wonder if anybody is watching this. I wonder if anybody's going to listen to this. And I think that some days that gets to me, to be perfectly honest, and it gets me down. And then other days I trust myself and understand that A, I'm a good artist because I work at it and I'm passionate. And B, I'm going to get to where I need to go eventually. And everything is going to take its course. I feel grateful. There's bands that can't even play a gig at the Mercury Lounge. And so we got a gig. And so I'm just going to pace myself. In my 20s, I was very much now, got to be now, got to be now. We just opened for this person. Well, we got to open for a bigger act. And I was a nightmare. I was a nightmare to work with. The people in the band were like, I was an egomaniac. And so I feel like being grounded in your craft is very, very important. There is no race. And so this makes us think that there's a race because that's what we're used to, but eventually it's going to get to where we need to go if we trust ourselves. It takes time. Yeah. And I'm excited. I think the bottom is the most fun stuff because I could do what I want. I could film an acoustic show. I could do this. I could do that. Sometimes it's also like, be careful what you wish for when you get to a place where you're so big that things are out of your control. And so, it's a balance. Sorry,
it is.
I ramble a lot.
No. I was going to say, you told me once that like you've made the best music in your career, like right now with Ultraviolet. Right now. Why do you think that is?
I think it's that I became patient as a songwriter, and I have Spencer who writes with me, who's a brilliant songwriter, and we have all these other musicians that are professionals, and together I'm listening to this and I'm sending it to people sometimes, and it has a pop to it. Like I know that it's personal to me, and I'm proud of that. And I think it resonates. It's going to resonate with other people. I think it's also subjective, right? Like I think like we've all been there. Like truth be told, like my first band, Thing One, our first album or our first two albums almost were generally hip hop, which I now look back.
Really?
Yeah. Wow. And I was a rapper. So just think about that.
I can't even picture it.
And back then you think like, oh my God, this is the best stuff I've done.
Yeah.
And now I look back at that and I say, how could I get this off the internet? But like whatever stage you're in, I feel like you're gonna glow yourself up and be yeah, this is the best shit I've done. For real, and so,
it should be like that, it should be that way because it means, it means you're evolving. If it's kind of staying the same, you don't want that, but also you don't want to get to where you are and be like, no, my last stuff was better. Like, I hope that my next project, I think I'm far and above where I am now. That means you're winning.
Yeah.
And your
only competitor is yourself.
Yeah, that's it. And you're always, like the thing that you just did isn't going to be the thing that you do now, and it's going to be different than the thing that you do tomorrow. And so to take everything day by day and to be relaxed and to have fun. I mean, this is fun.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing it for fun. It doesn't seem like it's fun sometimes because if I look on my phone and I see, Dua Lipa has 1 billion followers, and I'm like, hey guys, I mean, it's okay to have moments of ego like that too, because we're human.
Yeah. And
we've made a career now out of thinking that this is the only way to show visibility. And so with this project, I made a point, this music project, Ultraviolet, to make sure that I do things in the cracks that are secret shows. I'd love to play the subway with just like a karaoke machine of my songs, different weird things that I'm slowly building that I might not even be posting. You know, like almost keeping it kind of secret. I think that there's a sexiness to that of
I love
slowly,
that.
you know, building private shows, do a show in a barber shop, do a show here, do a show on the street, invite 16 people, you know, and charge them $20 a head, like do different things. I think that I want to keep it sort of elusive so that people are like, what is this?
Yeah. The mystique in artistry is like the most beautiful thing. And I miss that about pre-social media. Like when we were all growing up, you know, it wasn't like when we were little kids, there wasn't social media. And for celebrities, musicians, I was obviously always fascinated with, but like actors too, but musicians, like I couldn't just go onto their Instagram and see photos of them. If I wanted to see photos of them, I had to buy the magazine that they were interviewed in or buy their album fold out and look at that. That's it. Like that's what was available. I couldn't just go and watch them get on Instagram Live and talk about what they had for breakfast and like their workouts. Like I had to wait till like they're on. It's curated, and there's a mystique to artists that you can still maintain, but it's a lot harder because everybody now is like full visibility. Like like people know what like Cardi B's house looks like because she's on IG Live, or like I just don't. And it works for a lot of people, and for a lot of artists, that's their superpower, and that's great. But that's not my vibe, and I resonate with what you're saying because there's like mystique is beautiful.
How could I do this and kind of do it kind of under the radar and build it slowly? What happened to us as artists that we forgot that it's like a journey? And that sounds like a Target framed picture, but it's true. It's like this is a journey. Why are you so eager to get to this place so quickly and neglect the actual road that you have to go on? I booked this gig as an actor at 39. After hundreds of auditions that I didn't get, after 12 years of education, after good relationships and relationships that might have been toxic, my own faulty narratives, my own behavior. It's all the road that leads you to this other place. Yeah. So we need to stay mindful of that.
Yeah. That's beautiful. So that's like the most SOS soundbite.
It is. It is.
Put some dramatic like music over that, you know?
I will.
Exactly.
Don't worry, I will. Well, before we let you go, do you have any goals for yourself in the coming years, whatever that looks like for you as an artist specifically? Maybe actor, writer, but as an artist as a whole.
Well, first I'd like to get hair plugins.
Right.
Because
what?
I'm going bald in the back of my head, and it makes me
like, you have like thick, dark hair. Like, what are you talking about?
Molly, you're so nice.
I haven't seen the back of your head though.
You will never see it.
I see it when he turns around during like self tapes and shit. I'm like, there it is.
Yeah. Somebody said to me today while I was bartending, I also still do that. You know, you should keep your hair short because your bald spot doesn't look as prominent. I said, excuse
Who said that? Who said that?
You should keep your mouth shut because your stupidity doesn't seem as prominent.
One of the waiters. But you know, in all honesty, you know, what was the question? My goals are to stay. Here's another SOS vibe, right? Is just to try to stay very balanced and continue to practice yoga and fitness and stay right in the middle of all of my projects and try to stay in the moment. There's been moments where I'm like, I'm going to get this and I don't get it. And and so that's a little tricky as you start to audition a little bit more. I find it to be interesting that I've never identified as an actor as much as a writer and a musician, but it seems to be pulling me. And so my goal is to make sure that I stay true and stay balanced and try to stay relaxed and just about me, about how being good to myself and also not spiral into any vices and things holes that I've gone down in the past that will get me out of my tunnel vision, you know, and also it's kind of like to be good to myself, be kind to myself, you know, that's the biggest goal for us as artists is that people think that you need to be like, I think that as a writer and a musician, I could feel a little torn. I could feel manic. I could feel crazy. And like, I feel I can get a lot of good work out of myself. But acting is strange for me. Like I need to be very clear headed and very calm every day very straight and narrow in order to evoke good work. And so that's my goal, is to try to bring that to my other crafts, and just stay balanced. If I have to bartend another 10 years, it's okay. Like, stay balanced, just stay calm. That's my biggest goal. Continue to stay calm.
That's a good one.
I love that. Yeah. Wow.
Putting yourself first.
We have a lot of, we got a lot of chips against us. It's like I could wake up and in 14 minutes, I'm going to check what's going on with Russia. I'm going to check what's going on with our country. I'm going to check what's going on with Trump. I'm going to check what's going on with politics. Suddenly it's fucking 11:18 a.m. and I'm done.
I know.
I'm done. And so it's about also creating those boundaries for myself every day, so that I don't put myself into a spiral.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen, Joe.
Seriously. Man, thanks you so much.
Thanks so much for coming on, Joe.
Yeah.
We got to have you back on soon.
Next time I come back, maybe I'll go to Turkey to get hair plug-ins. That's where you're supposed to go. Yeah. And by then, if I do come back, I don't want you to acknowledge it. Just say I look good.
Yeah, we'll go back and edit all this out.
Well, I'm going to come back and I'm going to have. I want my hair to look exactly like Molly's when I come back. But I don't want you to say anything. Be like, oh, hey, Joe, so what's been up? And I just we'll just have like a conversation. But I don't want you to acknowledge that I did something to my hair. Deal?
I think that's doable.
Deal. But we are going to lead your next episode with this episode's goals. So people are going to have an eye out.
Yeah. They're like, does he have his head on straight? I don't know. His hair's telling me differently.
Well, I appreciate you girls, and I love you, and I appreciate you having me on.
Love you, Joe.
Thank you so much.
I love that convo. Man, we talked to him for we could talk to him for another hours, like a couple hours, because it's just that's how well the conversation flows. I know. True.
But it's true with everybody. It's like just good conversation, because, we start out with a topic in the sense of like, okay, we're talking about your film or your career or but it always, that's what I love about how this podcast has evolved. Like, it always turns into a more kind of like
deeper conversation,
philosophical, conversation about like
community and belonging and
self-love journeys and like, learning about yourself. Like he was talking about like through different phases of his life in his 20s and his mid 30s and booking this at 39 and just like what he wants for the next 40 years. And it's really what we're all doing the best we can.
We really are. So I really thank you so much again to Joey for being so open about his process, booking this part, but also his process as a writer and being open about his mental health journey as an artist, musician, everything, because it's something that we can all relate to on so many levels. So I hope to always have conversations that like get to that level too. And
Me too.
We're so lucky that we know people and have guests that, are open and vulnerable. So guys, just, if you're on the East Coast in New York City, you can check out his band Ultraviolet May 15th at the Mercury Lounge. It's going to be an amazing gig. And you can follow his artist journey at Joey Palestina on Instagram, and then at Ultraviolet. That's Paul, Paul, and then Traviolet for Ultraviolet, and then Mental Floss, which is at Mental, and then Flouse is spelled Flause. And that's fun because we've done some really fun sketches on that. So you guys are going to want to check that out. They're hilarious.
Yes.
And
And we are on Instagram and Twitter at the SOS Pod. We're on Patreon. So please be a subscriber. Help us monetize this thing that we're growing. And so we have $3 a month, $7 a month, or $11 a month, different benefits at each level.
Yes.
Access to different, bonus clips, extended interviews, merch,
all of it.
Promos, all that.
Shout out Steve, Nija, and Nancy for being patrons too. We love you guys.
And love you guys. And please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, especially helps us reach a wider audience. And YouTube, check us out on there.
Shout out
anywhere you find podcasts.
Shout out Black Lives Matter.
Yes. I'm Molly Cottrell.
I'm Alyssa Rosano.
And here's the Turning Meltdowns
into Magic.